This is the podcast overview for Chapter 9, Pro-Social Behavior. So the first thing is to explain the key difference between pro-social behavior and altruism. The two concepts are linked. They share a lot of similarity, but they are also very distinct. Pro-social behavior is more of a general category of behavior, where another person is acting in favor of others over self. Altruism digs a little bit deeper into the reasons for unselfish behavior. So make sure that you dive into each and understand the elements under each. Second, analyze how the murder of Kitty Genovese led to a greater understanding of when and why a person may or may not choose to help in an emergency. So it really comes down to understanding emergency type situations. What's special about those? What do people typically do when they're in those types of settings? What are some common things that tend to happen in the behavior of others? And then linked to that is 3, understanding what diffusion of responsibility is, why it happens, and how to reduce it. And then 4, outline Lotné and Darley's 5 essential steps to a pro-social response in an emergency, and note at what point help may be given. So Lotné and Darley are the ones that started researching the area of bystander intervention and looking at diffusion of responsibility in response to what happened with Kitty Genovese. They launched their field of research, and so they started really understanding what a typical pro-social response might be in an emergency situation. And they listed 5 steps to really getting involved and what it requires and at what point is help most likely to be given. Then 5th, discuss situational and motivational factors that can either enhance or inhibit helping. So what helps us to help and what stops us from helping. And these can be things like our mood, the models we have around us that we look at for examples, and then also our likeness for other people or our similarity to other people. Number 6, explain how a bystander's emotional state might influence their decision to help. So how might someone's emotional state play a role in whether or not they help? Also explain what the role of pluralistic ignorance is in the diffusion of responsibility. So we looked at pluralistic ignorance earlier in the semester. How does it play out here when we have a diffusion of responsibility happening in a bystander intervention type of situation? 8, discuss the nature of empathy, how it develops, and why people may differ as a function of it. Do all people have the same amount of empathy? Where does it come from? How does it develop? So the book's going to be helpful here, but also some of the videos I posted this week are going to be helpful there too. 9, compare and contrast the following: the empathy altruism hypothesis, the negative state relief model, and the empathetic joy hypothesis, and kin selection theory. These are all different theories as to why people help. None are right or wrong. They're just different reasons we come to understand people have for helping. So be familiar with each of them. This should say 10 right here. This is off, so I'll fix it. But also know examples of what a person's reasons for helping would be within each of those above theories. Identify what is meant by defensive helping. When a person helps in a defensive kind of format or strategy, what does that look like? And also, what is the role of gratitude in helping? We think of this word gratitude, being grateful. How does that play a role in whether or not someone helps, and how? 12, note the factors that may cause a person to help someone who has been the victim of a catastrophe. So we tend to see a big response in helping whenever there's a catastrophe. You think of like a natural disaster, an earthquake, a tsunami, and so it evokes in people a different kind of response than, say, a murder or, a theft or any other bad thing that could happen to a person, an illness. And it's sad that it's that way, but why? Why is it unique in a sense of this event happening and why it triggers kind of a more of a response in people? Then 13, outline other personality factors aside from empathy that are associated with prosocial behavior. What other types of things about a person, personality traits, are associated with prosocial behavior? And pay particular attention to the qualities of the altruistic personality. So someone who has an altruistic personality also tends to have certain qualities or certain traits about them. What are those? Explain the various motives people have for volunteering. So here's a different kind of prosocial behavior. It's not in response to an emergency or helping necessarily, but volunteering is a huge endeavor that takes place worldwide. Many different organizations are involved. Many of you have volunteered. What might be a person's reasons for volunteering? And then contrast the following terms: egoism, self-interest, moral integrity, and moral hypocrisy. What are these terms in their meaning, and how do they relate to one another, and how do they map onto volunteering? Note the general reactions of those who receive help in terms of how it feels to receive such assistance. So how does the recipient usually respond when they're given help or assistance? And then lastly, state, define, and contrast the 4 key models or hypotheses of why we engage in prosocial behavior. And these are very similar to what we see up here. So it's doing a little bit more with these. And that is it for the objectives for Chapter 9.